Back to the discussion. Oh, I better tell you. I'm Llewellyn King. This is White House Chronicle, coming to you from Washington. And my guest is the absorbing Amitai Etzioni, professor of the George Washington University, formerly of Columbia and Harvard. Back to the discussion. We are just talking about China. I see it as maybe a problem in the future. You are saying, let us not be predisposed to say it is a problem, which, because of your specialty as sociology, causes me to ask this question. Historically, when have countries built up this inevitability of war when there was no real casus belli?
It's very common. World War I, World War II, all started...
World War I is probably the classic example, isn't it?
Exactly.
World War II is a little more complicated.
I very much agree, but there are very few iron laws in history. First of all, the samples are very small, and so we can go... But the main question now in the nuclear age, where confrontation are so dangerous, why not give a peaceful coexistence, or as Henry Kissinger calls it, co-evolution, a chance? So we don't have, nobody, even our most extreme...
Co-evolution.
Right. Our most extreme hawks don't argue that we're going to have to face Chinese warships or airplanes in the next 20 years. They're talking about 30 years from now, because the Chinese military is so weak. They have now one aircraft carrier which they bought from Ukraine, which they don't quite know how to operate. Their submarines are what they call very noisy. And in many, many ways, from their budget, which is 1/6 of the American budget, the defense budget. So nobody claims they pose a danger in the near future. That's what I'm saying is, I'm not claiming that I can predict history or that we will never have to face an aggressive China. All I'm saying is there's enough time to give coevolution a chance. And here's another concept I think we need to introduce into discussion. Both the Bush and the Obama administration keep challenging China to become a responsible stakeholder in the world order. And what they're saying is that a country which is a good citizen behaves a certain way. It sends a lot of humanitarian aids, it sends a lot of peacekeepers, it pays for the United Nations. There's a whole list of things they demand China to do, which is very much an American list. And I don't think it's either fair or wise to hold China to a list of American goods
Amitai, to this point in our discussion, and this is the second program in which we've discussed these things, to this point in our discussion, it is seen there are two 800-pound gorillas, America and China. But in fact, there are three. There's America, China, and India. And India is a lot closer to China, and there's long-term friction between India and China. How does that change the equation?
It's a very important point. It's a very important point. Though, again, using your imagery, I would call them 80 pounds gorillas. Because, again, by any of the measurements...
I myself have never weighed a gorilla. I do not wish... I like gorillas, but I don't wish to be that close to one at 80 or 800.
And my point is, don't worry, it's okay. You don't have to fear those gorillas. In all seriousness, the notion we have, which is, again, part of this rush to building adversaries, as the old theory is to balance. The idea is that when a new power rises, we have to take all the other powers and make a coalition with them against a new power to balance. It's kind of a very old diplomatic notion. This day and age, what does it mean for India to balance China? India has very similar problems. They need resources. They have a huge part of the population which demands the good life, by which they mean affluence. If the more India spends on the military...
sometimes the good life may include just simple electricity.
Indeed, indeed. So for them to spend ever more money on the military, it undermines their #1 source of legitimacy. And above all, so if they go down that road, so where are we going to get? And an arms race between India and China, where we will help supply India, and the end of which we're going to have another war in Asia. To what purpose? I mean, China has no ambition. There's nothing ever, anybody, written to occupy India. What would they possibly do with it, you know? And the other way around, why would India even dream of occupying China? So there are border issues. There have been some minor skirmishes, and they have to be worked out. But to go from that to some kind of a global chess game in which we're going to move India to balance China, it's just, I don't see the basis in either diplomacy or reality.
The historian Niall Ferguson has been doing a television series, fascinating series on the history of the world, almost history of civilizations, and China is the West and China. This is his sort of predates us a bit. At the beginning of the Ming Dynasty, China was an enormous imperial power. It had the largest ships on earth, 400 feet long, built of wood. Nothing like that was ever built in the West. And yet suddenly it stopped. The next emperor in line said, no, we're going to stay within our borders, we're going to build our walls, we're not going to have these ships. They had them broken up. What does that tell us about China, and could we see, have we ever seen anything like that historically, when consciously many empires have failed, they've deteriorated, but where consciously an empire decided to dismantle itself?
Well, I don't know if there are other precedents on this, but it's a very important issue you raise here. Recently, there has been a lot of discussion about the Chinese unique model of capitalism, so-called state capitalism or authoritarian capitalism. And for a while, it was argued that the Washington consensus, the notion we're all going to become democracy and democratic capitalism, is being replaced by the Beijing consensus, in which many countries in the third world want to imitate the Chinese model. Now, what's happening now, though, China illustrates what happens when you have this central command and control system rather than an open and democratic system. They decided 30 years ago on a one-child policy, which at that time seemed to them make a lot of sense. And they enforced it brutally. In fact, one of the reasons the recent dissenter was protesting still forced abortions in contemporary China. Well, the result is a very, very severe and rapid aging of the Chinese population, which one of the most rapidly aging societies. Well, ours is staying actually quite young. And
we have imported population, we have new population. They are not friendly to people flooding in.
But look back, the point I want to connect to the issue you raised, you look back at this kind of decision-making, where the emperor or the central committee can make a rule and 1 billion people have to follow. It was not difficult 30 years ago to say, wait a moment, if you're going to, I mean, a math teacher could have figured out, if you're going to have one child per family, you're going to have ever fewer people supporting the whole generation. And now, they're trying to begin to reverse it, but it's going to take them another 30 years to catch up.
I was interested when I was in China how many young people asked me about Social Security in America, assuming that I was on it, which I was not at that point. But they're very concerned with the retirement, which in a bursting frontier kind of capitalism, you don't expect people to be preoccupied with retirement, but ordinary people are preoccupied with retirement to an extent that I have never found in any other country. Now,
exactly,
this is
because it don't
not a scientific sampling, but nonetheless, it is a sampling, and I found that extremely interesting.
You're absolutely right. They don't have Social Security. They have a spreading of Alzheimer. They have many of the dementia issues which come with many more people becoming old. They don't have a network of nursing homes. So supposedly their tradition is young take care of the old, but they're not enough young to go around. Now add to that the environmental challenge. Again, what they did for the last 20 years is try to quickly get a lot of income, a lot of products to a lot of people, paying no mind to the effect on the environment. And the pollution now, James Farrell just came out with a book on China in which he points out that the lifespan in Beijing, their major capital, their major city, is 5 years shorter because of other people, because of the pollution. So aside from the demographic challenges of a rapidly aging society, they have enormous environmental challenges because they so much rely on the burning of coal and such. So you put all this together, the pressure of the population, which demands the good life they see now in the cities, which is more than half the people are still on the countryside, with the demographic challenge, the environmental challenge, and you see why they have their hands full for the future.
Amitai, it does seem that it isn't a threat now. Mm-hmm. Maybe there are people with a vested interest in making it a threat. The old friends of the military-industrial complex. Somebody's coming, somebody's coming. We must build weapons. However, you know, it is a fascinating thing, China. It seems to me, and I'm not an expert on its history by any means at all, but the two things that mean to me quite extraordinary is how quickly it can go off the rails. When it decided that it didn't need big ships, that would seem to be a going off the rails. It allowed the West to become the dominant force in the world. And the other going off the rails, if you are, was the Cultural Revolution. Here you have 1 billion people who are persuaded by some absolute nonsense of cultural purity, and previously, I don't know what the population was, probably only 1 million, 2 million at a time or less, at a time when they decided that they would no longer be a seafaring nation. This is a tremendous going off the rails, and you can only have that kind of going off the rails, for good or for evil, if you have a centralized government. We couldn't do this yet. And how the form of government has everything to do with whether it is going to be a peaceful, constructive neighbor on planet Earth, a crowded planet Earth, or not.
I seriously believe that we vastly exaggerate their successes. And we make a prediction. In social science, it's not easy to make predictions. That we will meet again and visit this issue in 5 years, not 20, not 30. And we'll change our tune about China just the way we changed our tune about Japan, which we once also built up like this. And that is that they're going to slow down. They're going to have they have lots of riots as it is. They have a lot of strikes in their minds, and otherwise they have a lot of dissent. Their attempt to control it to a police state will fail, and they're going to have so much internal turmoil that they will pose no threat to anybody but to themselves.
That's our program for today. I thank you, Amitai Etzioni. The Chinese, like yourself and like the Indians, have a lot of talent, but so do we. Cheers.
Many have spoken out on the need to transition to a clean energy future. At Exelon, we are acting. By 2020, we are committed to reducing, offsetting, or displacing more than 15 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions annually through greening our operations, helping our customers and communities reduce their emissions, and offering more low-carbon electricity in the marketplace. At Exelon, we are taking action and we are seeing results.
White House Chronicle is produced in collaboration with WHUT, Howard University Television. From Washington, D.C., this has been White House Chronicle, a weekly analysis of the news with insight and a sense of humor, featuring Llewellyn King, Linda Gasparello, and guests. This program may be seen on PBS stations and cable access channels. To view the program online, visit us at whitehousechronicle.com.